which will be the U of T OISE account. So that's where it's going to be. So
Awesome.
tonight, just for those that are listening, hi, welcome. I'm Jennifer Britton. I'm the speaker for tonight. We're really talking about injecting coaching skills to help you amplify your mentoring conversations. And I know as many of you came in, we were asking you, have you started your mentoring conversations already? It's great to hear that you are. I hope that you'll pick up some ideas that will really facilitate that, because mentoring is not something new. We all know, hopefully, that it has its roots in ancient Greece, when Mentor was hired to work with Telemachus, one of the sons in ancient Greece, and pass on all that they knew. As you've heard a little bit about my story, mentoring has followed me across the world. And actually, in 2014, I set up a side business. So my company is known as Potentials Realized. I also have many brands under that umbrella, including the Mentor Roadmap. And I don't think even Karen knows this, but I've spent a lot of time over the last 6 years working with Fortune 500s out of the US on helping them enhance their mentoring processes. Pre-pandemic, these skills were important. I think now in our evolving workspace, even more important as people are moving roles, jobs, and relationships. And so, what I want to do tonight is tailor our conversation. First of all, I don't want to make any assumptions. So, quick show of hands, or you can put this in chat. How many of you are meeting in person? If you're meeting in person for your mentoring conversations, if you don't mind popping in chat in person. If you're meeting virtually, pop in chat or place in chat virtually. If you're doing both, let us know by typing in hybrid. That way we get a sense of who's in the room, and that will also help me adjust some of the comments that I make tonight. So let's see what we've got. We've got virtually, a couple of hybrids here as well. Great. So that is really valuable. And again, I'm going to bring forward some of the evolving research that we are seeing across industries right now around virtual conversations. Very interesting, as you heard, 7 books that I've published. I published the world's first book on group coaching back in 2009 through Wiley. And that book has had me talking around the world about the value of bringing coaching to more than one person. Given my own role in leadership with hybrid teams since the 1990s, when we were connected by long range radio, we did not have telephones in one of the countries that I worked with. In fact, the World Bank had removed the phones in 1988 due to austerity measures. And so the teams that I supported, which could take 5 days travel by horseback, dugout canoe, and army truck, we were connected daily for 3 sit reps a day. A sit rep is a situation report, really is a touch base. We would call it in today's lingo. It was really a huddle, a team huddle, but in those days done by these long range radios. If you think about the TV show MASH, if you've ever watched MASH, and this is dating me, it's those big old Army radios that crackle and sizzle. And it taught me everything that I know really about leading in a virtual space. Today, 2022, the world has been virtual for the better part of the last, 2-3 years. But the virtual practices that we are seeing are now being validated in the experiential space. So I want to tailor our comments because we want to build onto what's working well already. So if you don't mind, share with us in chat what's one thing that's working well with your mentoring conversations this year. Let us know in chat what's one thing that's working really well. We know from your check-ins, as some of you came on before the top of the hour, that people are meeting already. Maybe it's just you've got a rhythm happening. Maybe it's a topic. So let's look to chat. And again, we've got things like keeping a consistent check-in timeline with an accomplishment list, asking for mentee goals, also going to medieval times, having some fun, building rapport, and going into chats every 2 weeks. It's interesting because there's been a lot of research done over the years. I'm going to come back to this question because what we know is that some of the things that make virtual conversations work better are things that you're mentioning already. Being really clear with our expectations. When are we meeting? How are we meeting? Where possible, streaming and having our cameras on, which most of you are really great about as we started today's call. We will be doing a breakout throughout our call tonight. We hope that you will connect in with some of the other mentors. And so you have the choice to start your video at that time if you would like. We also know from a research perspective, again, these are based on very practical organizational and association-based marketing practices, that it's important to keep the conversations going as if it was a face-to-face meeting. And keep that consistency, having the start and end time, having an agenda, and checking in regularly around what's working well, and of course, what adjustments do we need to make. You may put some of that social piece. I love hearing that some of you are going to go to medieval times. That's like a bit of a drop-in in today's virtual space, but it can also be useful to keep some of that social time together. We know from research that great mentoring is all about building strong relationships. And I want to take us back to some work that was done by Ensure, and I can't remember the other name, it's on the next slide, but they found 3 things led to mentoring not working. So it's Murphy and Ensure, and this is from 2004. Doesn't matter if it's an old reference, but really lack of commitment to the relationship. Mentoring, like coaching, is all about leaning in together. In my work, my writing, I talk about the triad of trust, safety, and connection. And we know that, especially in virtual spaces, it's critical that we don't only feel connected, but that we trust the people that we're in dialogue with. We know a little bit about them. This was, in fact, why I shared a little bit about my own story, not to impress, but to create that bridge of connection. Mentoring works and doesn't work if people aren't committed to showing up. So it's great that you're sharing with us the best practice of really leaning into that. We know as well that mentoring derails when there are unclear expectations. So think about how you're regularly inviting your mentees to be articulating, what do you want out of today's call? Or what will success look like at the end of the call? These are some of the things we do every day as professional coaches so that we're really co-creating relationships together. Murphy and Ensure also found that mentoring fails when there's a lack of trust. And it's harder to build trust in a virtual space. We can't see each other in the same way. And so what we know about building trust in any space, virtual, physical, or hybrid, it's all about demonstration of things like follow through, reliability. Are you showing up when you say you will be there? These elements take on even greater meaning. Now, mentoring can fail for some other reasons as well. And perhaps I know many of you are seasoned mentors. You've been doing this for several years, several cohorts. But even if you're new, like what else might get in the way of mentoring being most effective? I know Karen's saying co-creation is key, but what could derail a mentoring relationship? And we know that in this virtual space, relationships are everything, right? We've been in our bubbles for several years. So what might weaken a mentoring relationship? Pop that in chat. So Barbara's mentioning the imbalance of talk. Yeah. Amilcar, lack of regular communication. Darius, disagreement. Karen, breach of confidentiality. Really good one. Like, are you and your mentee creating shared agreements around what is shared and what is not shared? Often we call that the Vegas rule in coaching. What is said on the line stays on the line. Liliana is adding attitude, and Beverly saying not understanding the cultural context. Yes, across the board, one of the biggest challenges in the virtual conversation zone has been what I often call like what's happening outside of the screen, right? We come onto calls, we're in our little boxes, but we don't have the context of what is beyond the screen unless we intentionally invite that in. So there's real opportunity for us to be looking at how do we invite sharing? How do we widen the frame of our conversations, which helps us, of course, reduce any assumptions that we may be making. A couple of other ideas that I want to point us to, and I'm going to go back to our list, so feel free to look at the list as well. Melanie's adding, not driving the purpose of the relationship. Absolutely. And Murphy and Ensher's research, which has been some of the seminal research in this field of mentoring, continue to point at the importance of creating relationships with purpose, right? This is not just a relationship. Mentoring is probably one of the most important relationships we have. And in most mentoring programs, it is that mentee who is helping us as mentors understand what do they want to get out of this process. So as you get to know each other, really be thinking about the questions that'll help frame out your time together. Darius is also noting here, again, some things that may derail different goals, right? And so best practice in mentoring across programs often is making sure that every call, physical or virtual, we're checking in. What is the goal you're working on today, mentee? What do you want to focus on? Because I'm sure you've been in conversations like I have with my mentees where, they may be working on 2 or 3 things at once. And so I want to confirm at the start of the conversation, where are we going today? Which area do you want to look at? And is there anything I should understand about what's been happening in your world since we last met? Those are some of the things I like to really kick off a conversation. And I didn't share this in my intro, but part of the mentoring work that I did early on in my career, I was being rotated in and out of posts, in and out of roles every 3 to 36 months. So 3 months to 3 years, that was it. A big part of my role as a leader was about building capability. And I realized very quickly how important these relationship building skills were in our work together. This is where we can see relationship, mentoring, along with good conversational skills, which is what I'm going to bring tonight as we talk about coaching. So back to our list, we're almost through it, but we've got a few more things that could derail mentoring. Poor planning, lack of follow through as well, I imagine. Mindset, Liliana, no clear shared expectations. Carmen, different priorities. Cindy, unrealistic goals. Emlikar, having different goals, not being on the same page vis-a-vis goals. Osgood, mentor can't provide assistance or expertise for the goals. Carolyn, listening to understand what is really being communicated and shared in the virtual setting. And another great one from Emlikar, which is unrealistic expectations. So all of these have the potential to derail, and notice how relationally based they are. How do we form relationships in the virtual space? Of course, it's through conversation. So some key skill sets for mentors, and again, this goes back to Murphy and Ensher's research. Years ago, they identified these 4 buckets of skills: listening, feedback, creating powerful questions, and then another bucket of holding the space for not only accountability in what the mentee is doing, but journeying with them, acknowledging their journey, celebrating and encouraging them as they go. So what I found interesting in 2005, as I was sharing this with one of our associations here in the Toronto area, I thought, goodness, this is a lot like coaching, what I've been learning to do as a coach. And in fact, the skill sets for mentors are the skill sets for coaches. So tonight, we're going to be doing some work and breakouts around getting you to think about and share your best practices around things like asking good questions, listening, and holding the space for what we would call in coaching, that piece around acknowledgement, saying to our mentee, great job, or really inviting them to also notice their progress as they go. So before we go into it, a couple of ideas, and then I'm going to stop my share because I want to just bring your voices in as well. Just the flip side of what we heard earlier, and very much your comments reflected this, what we do know that makes mentoring work in any space, virtual, remote, hybrid, the clear goals. And are we being really clear on who's setting those goals? Are we inviting the mentee to talk about what success will look like and what the timeline is for those goals? Are we leaning into the fact that there's some shared expectations, what the purpose is of our relationship, what the mentee wants to get out of it, what I as the mentor want to get out of it? And I hope you know, and I hope you hear this regularly in this program, how important your role is as a mentor. I know many of you come back probably time and time again, year after year, to contribute, but I think all of us can think about our own careers and how instrumental our formal and informal mentors have been in shaping our career path. Research also continues to show that typically mentors get as much out of the mentoring experience as mentees do. We might not notice it right away, but upon reflection, we can start seeing that. Another piece that we know that helps mentoring really work effectively is this piece around co-creation, or just simply having really clear roles and responsibilities. Who's taking the lead on what, what's expected of me, and how do we ensure that we have those relationships with purpose? So this brings me a little bit to my own work, which again, in writing, I think it's very much about how do we build these relationships, especially in a virtual space? Because we know the power of psychological safety. We know how important it is to build trust. And we really have to do that through relationships. So for a lot of the rest of tonight, rather than me sharing slides, we're going to be connecting in with each other, because the learning, the peer process of learning is so much more powerful than any expert coming to lecture, as you know, as educators. And so we want to really cultivate and draw upon your wisdom. So I'm going to stop my share for a moment. We've covered really the relationship, what the research says. I'm just curious, as we have about an hour together tonight, what would you really like to leave this conversation with? And if you have a very specific element that you want to leave with, let's get you to put up your hand. It could be a question. It could be a very specific element that you want. Many of you are doing this work virtually, so maybe you have questions around the virtual nuance of things. Just want to take a moment to do a pulse check and see if there are any questions or comments. Any questions at this stage? Okay, Frank, over to you. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
What do you do with sometimes you have students who just don't feel like as if they need to be mentored, and they sort of sit back in everything that's happening to another student or everybody else, so they become, or they feel dormant. How do you ignite them?
That's a great question. Well, let's put this out to the whole crew here, right? Because I imagine some of you might be in a similar position. The word I heard, and it may be different for all of you, is like, how do you ignite? How do you ignite the possibility? So I'm going to invite you to pop into chat some ideas as you hear this from Frank. Frank, we don't need a lot more detail, but what does your gut naturally sort of compel you to maybe ask or do with this mentee?
Well, you can, I feel one of the strategies I use, I teach by example. I use the example of the other student, because for the last few years, I've had 1, 2, 3 years, I've had double students, 2 students, to encourage the other to do the same thing, engage in the conversation, spur them with words that promote dialogue, and things of that nature.
Yeah. And again, I think from hearing and meeting some of you already earlier on, I understand that some of you have like 2 people that you're mentoring, right?
Yeah.
And again, that peer-to-peer relationship can sometimes be really influential in drawing a person out of their shell and providing that motivation or not. Another vehicle, again, that often I meet in with mentees and mentors, and a lot of mentees that I've worked with have had their mentors do a couple of things. Sometimes they may pick a book or a podcast and listen to those things together and it spurs some new ideas. Other mentors and in some other mentoring programs, we usually recommend maybe doing something like a Strengths Finder assessment. Strengths Finder comes from Gallup, and it's a really amazing resource that can help people understand some of those innate natural strengths that they are maybe cultivating or being more aware of. So whatever you have at your resource, I imagine in your role, there may be some different assessments or tools that you could also bring in to help activate or maybe shed light on what gets activated. You know, for me, I'm a strategic thinker. I really love to develop people. And so that's what I gravitate to. But if, you know, thinking back 3 decades ago in my young 20s, it was really useful for me in dialogue with my mentors to say, I want to watch you in action. I want to see what you're doing so that I can start learning about what it means to be an experiential educator. That's how I started out, as an experiential educator. And I learned a lot by viewing. So I think we heard that earlier as well. How do we model? Now we've got a few more suggestions in the chat, different ideas again. These are all different possibilities. You are best placed with your mentees, but you might find out their reason why they are doing what they're doing and studying. So again, people like Simon Sinek, if you've ever watched Simon Sinek, who writes on the power of why and you know, taking people to that compelling vision. Why do you do what you're doing? Karen suggested, can you build on a strength that has emerged? And Beverly is indicating, I ask, of everything we can focus on, what matters most to you right now? And what might matter in 3 years? That's brilliant. Beverly, I'm wondering, do you want to unmute and just share what you've noticed when you've asked that question?
Oftentimes it may be they're thinking about a career, they're in the midst of studies, but they're sort of thinking about what will come next. But sometimes it deals with relationships, you know, and so it varies. But what I'm saying, I guess, to them is that acknowledgement of the other, right? So, you know, what of all the things we can look at, what would be ideally your agenda? And then I can adapt to that.
Fantastic. And again, that's where in any coaching conversation and mentoring conversation, ideally, we want the mentee, in this case, to be driving the bus. Now, we need to also be sure that we're communicating that, right? As mentors and mentees, it can sometimes get very unclear. Like, have I communicated that as a mentee, you need to be setting the agenda? We're working around your goals, not my goals as the mentor. Beverly, is there anything else you want to share around that question that you've put in chat? I think it's a really good one to start the conversation. What might matter in 3 years?
And then in 3 years, that to them is an unexpected, like they know the now, and by making a little dislocation, then we add a different level of conversation. And something which I'm always curious about is the space people are in. And I was watching Mark Carney earlier this afternoon, and sort of the books behind him, and the, you know, I'm very curious as to space and place.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I can make the link too to what Cindy Sinclair has put in, change the focus of mentoring to casual conversation, i.e. ask, what is your favorite pastime, hobby, or place to visit, or food? This helps a mentee relax, feel normal, and open up to freer exchange. Back to that triangle of trust, safety, and connection, right? If we can't share ourselves, if we don't see a bridge with other people, it's very difficult to really be able to lean in and trust someone else. So it's not just small talk, right? This is part of building relationship. And in today's world, it's not just about having business results. we have to bring ourselves into the conversation. So I really appreciate that suggestion that you've also put in there about building it in, Cindy. Is there anything you want to add? Cindy, have you used this? Is this something that you want to elaborate on at all?
Thanks very much. Brilliant presentation so far. I'm really enjoying it. So thank you. What I would add to it is that I have children. I have teenagers, they're older now. And I do realize that sometimes kids in universities or students, they have this feeling about themselves that they're better, or they don't need help, or they don't want anyone to guide them, even though they need it. So sometimes it's really trying to gauge where that person is. And I find that helps for me, just with my kids, but also with some of my mentees. Again, you mentioned the word trust. Sometimes it's hard to build trust when you say, tell me what you're interested. Let's set up 3 goals that you want to achieve within the next year. That's not building trust. That's sort of putting a wall up. So, you're sitting there, I have to do this job. I have to be a mentor, and you're there, you're the mentee. I have to guide you. But how do you build that connection? How do you make that person relax? How do you make them open up and start speaking out, like really what's in their heart? And I find that oftentimes, but sometimes mentoring is really not reaching those goals. It can go in different directions. It could be like going to the ball game, going for coffee, making that person feel that they're really part of a community. So, I think it's a one-on-one in a lot of situations, but to come back to the word trust, I think the one way you can build trust is letting the person relax, let them speak about themselves, let them tell you a story, let them make a joke, let them, talk about their brother or their sister or their mom or their dad. I find those kinds of questions or conversations that lead into those kind of personal mention or personal thoughts can really open up doors. So I use that quite a bit to develop that personal relationship before I think about goals and where you want to go. Let's have a conversation. Let's chat. Let's see where you're at. Sometimes they may just have they're going through something personal at the moment, personal issues, economic, financial, in some ways, family. So there are all kinds of reasons. So I use it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Cindy. And I think you pointed us to, there's so much pressure in today's world, right? Not only as a student, but in the world today. And so how do we listen, right? Back to what Murphy and Ensure found with their research decades ago, the ability to listen, the ability to just hold the space, get curious, and share your stories, right? I think many mentees are really curious about, like, how do people get to where they got to in their career? So together, co-design what's important. So I could see we've got a couple hands up. Jeffrey, Liliana, I'm not sure who put up their hand first. So I'm gonna go with you, Liliana, because you're first on my screen. Liliana, was it a comment or another question to take us maybe in a bit of a different direction? If you want to just unmute Liliana, feel free to do so. All right, she's put her hand down. Liliana? Okay, so Jeffrey, we may go to you.
Righty.
So
Okay. Hi there. So the question or thought I was having as we were having this conversation, I've mentored, like, a lot of people mentored for several years. I was in a situation a few years ago where the mentoring situation, unlike this, had a real sort of attachment to accountability. So I found it very, very dynamic. Now there was no police officer involved, but there was an expectation when the mentee said, I will do this and this by this, that it happened. So I've found sometimes in this, I'm missing that sort of dynamic, powerful way of persuasion and getting someone to be in a place that they couldn't quite manage on their own. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about how we do that in this environment, which is much more casual. And
yes. Well, this is the piece around coaching, right? So coaching as a modality really is a partnership. It's a thinking partnership. But one of the ingredients to coaching that doesn't necessarily exist in mentoring is the piece around accountability. And as a professional coach, right, that's why my clients hire me, to help them get wherever they want to get faster or different. And so part of our conversation is always about coming in and starting from that place of, how's it going? You know, last time we met, you said you wanted to do X or Y. Let's check in around it. And we don't always have those thinking partners. So this may be, as a great example, Jeffrey, right? There may be mentees who are like, I want you to be a bit of an accountability partner with me. And so that we need to design that rather than assume this is what someone wants. But if it is accountability related, you know, what I would say is a bit of a sidebar here. This is where technology can actually become such an interesting place to explore with our mentees. Again, my son is 17. He's a digital native, right? He's a typical Gen Zer. He's all about the digital space, right? Like if I ask him to help me out in this business, he's like, send me an email, mom. Like, don't tell me verbally, I want to see it in writing. And this has gotten me thinking in the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, one of my books pre-pandemic was a book called Plan, Do, Track. It was a productivity resource for virtual, remote, hybrid professionals. Came out in 2019, early 2019, a year before the pandemic. And it really has been well received, even though it's analog, so it's paper-based. But tracking is so important in this space, especially when we're in the hybrid world. How do we see what we do? So whether it is more like my son's digital tracking or my Gen Xer analog tracking on paper, a very easy way that you might want to explore with a mentee, Jeffrey, is there an app? Is there a process we could follow to help you with those goals that you want? So many people like Peter Drucker always said, and Frank, we're just going to let you know that we can now see your screen. So I'll get you to just close your screen. This is not my room. So somehow you've taken over the screen sharing. I'm going to see if maybe Karen, can you, Frank, easiest way is just for you to stop your share probably. So I'll get you to just close your window. But back to the tracking story. I think, Jeffrey, that might be something for you to look at. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah, thank you. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So Frank, we're still seeing your screen. I'm going to stop your screen share, not to be rude. I'm going to take us back into our screen share. So
Thank you. Thanks.
So these things happen in the Zoom world. Liana, I want to come back to you.
Thank you. I could not get my mute off for some reason. Thank you for your patience. Okay.
I'm going to leave the screen up here so we, just in case it toggles back to Frank, if that's okay. So yeah, Liana, what was your question or comment?
I was just having one of the mentees that I'm helping and supporting and learning from right now has come back to me with one of the goals that they have is to learn from me, and they don't want me to point them in any direction or to tell them to read anything or to do anything. They just want to learn directly from me. And I just kind of got stuck, and we haven't had our next meeting yet, but I'm just thinking, like, how do I share with them that sometimes part of my help will be directing them somewhere?
Yeah, great question. Has anyone else here had something similar? And if so, feel free to either raise your hand or put a tip or a suggestion. So Liana, I'm also guessing that it's like early days, right? You've just started this relationship.
It is, yes. We've just created our goals. Our relationship is just forming.
Yeah. So as you can see on the screen, right, there's sort of 3 things we want to do at this start. We want to get to know each other, establish that relationship, build some of the rapport. And that may be done socially as well as, in social virtual or social in person. We want to get people to set their goals and then clarify expectations. And this is where there's that, depending on the level of trust, right, we can figure out, can we be really firm with this or not? And part of it is really feeling it out. Luisa, I know you've put up your hand, and I don't know if you have a response to what Liana is asking about. If it is, feel free to unmute. But I think really looking to Liana, providing, one thing that mentors can do is providing that bigger context, right? We can sort of contextualize things and say, as a mentor, I bring a perspective, and certainly my work has been influenced by A, B, C, D. That may be another way to be able to bring indirectly another voice into the system. Luisa, I don't know, do you want to make a comment here, or is it a separate question?
I had a separate question, but I can kind of piggyback on that and saying that, as being a mentor, as for student teachers and teacher candidates, and now as a few years through OISE, as an alumni, I could say that the rapport is one of the most important things. But if they do value your knowledge and leadership so much, then have them continue with you and have them kind of participate in what what in the higher learning and continue to learn, because they obviously cherish that and they really value that. So I think as long as as long as they're seeing the value in that, and that can also help the rapport as well. But
Yeah. Thank you. And Louisa, we'll come right back to you because I just want to, there may be something in these additional pieces of the arc of relationship, right? Because mentoring typically has that start and end. And actually most research points to the fact that it is best to actually put a bit of a close on the mentoring relationship at the end of the expected period. Some relationships continue, but you almost want to recontract, redesign how you are together, especially if it's under an umbrella of a program like this, because there is an energy, right? There's an arc of energy in terms of how much we can really be showing up consistently. And so the clarity, especially when we're hybrid or virtual, is critical. So what are we doing? What are we focusing on? How do we have these regular touch points, whether regular means weekly, bi-weekly, or other? Are we coming back, and maybe in a few months, you're going to be reviewing and revisiting the goals. Is this still a value? What's working well, what's not working well in our relationship and in the way we're meeting, that may feed into some adjustment. And of course, celebrating the successes that happen, right? In a changing world right now, we don't know, we never know what's going to be around the corner. So how do you also build in that celebration aspect of learning? And certainly not only at closure identifying learning or capturing lessons learned right at the end, but maybe making that part of your regular ongoing mentoring process. I'm all about feedback, especially in an ever-changing world. I've had the privilege of mentoring people in all different contexts, right? One of my roles, I was based out of Barbados for 3 years. It sounds really great, but it was a lot of work flying around the region. But one of my mentees, she was an amazing PhD candidate, and she came and joined us for about six months. She was from Italy, and she was so vibrant and amazing. But our only time that we could find together, our schedules were so different that we had to find time on the beach. In fact, it was probably in that 6-month period the only time I ever got to the beach, because we could go and walk together. And actually taking our conversations out of the office, I think it was something she kept mentioning was really valuable to her, because like me, you live and operate in context, but you may not actually get to be in the context if your work is so demanding. So be noticing where you are throughout this year. You're gonna have a copy of these slides, but the relational aspect of this work is really, really quite critical. So with that, I'm going to go back. We've got another hand. Liliana, is that good? Is that useful for you?
I think as you were speaking and as the other people were typing, what I realized is that person has probably been given lots of stuff to read and somebody has directed them before and not supported them. And so what I need to do going forth is dig a little deeper into why they feel that way, instead of sort of telling them, well, sometimes that could happen. Not that I've done it before, but it might happen. And so I need to just listen and find out where they're being triggered by something, perhaps.
Yeah. And I know people who are listening to this recording won't be able to see the chat, so I'm going to just read out what Alice had written. Both my mentees have very busy schedules with school, work, and family, so it is very difficult to ask them to read outside of their courses. I help with listening to them and help them clarify what we're working on and make them focus on goals. And I think Carolyn, your comment as well, agree with this. It's okay during the mentees' time doing graduate studies to have up and down periods, competing demands, caregiving, family, work, other challenges that derail their goals, and reinsurance and sharing of journeys can be helpful or can be of help, etc. So my chat has just closed. I think what we'll do is we will move on. So Liliana, thanks for bringing this question. Louisa, before I go to Karen, Louisa, was there another question that you wanted to ask? I know you're.
Yes, sorry. I just to clarify, this is my first year that I have two mentees. I've previously had just one, and not as commonly meeting per month, like for monthly meetings. So for the two, I currently have two mentees, and they're from similar backgrounds, from China. And I just wanted to know if it would be too much, if it would be inappropriate to meet together.
So let me put it out to the group. Every mentoring program is a little bit different. Several of you do have two mentees that you support. Do you meet regularly together? Do you meet separately? Just feel free to unmute and pop in a comment there verbally. Who meets together? I'm going to put us in gallery view. So Liliana is saying I'm doing it separately, but is anyone meeting together with their mentees? Carmen's a no. Not. Frank is yes.
Yes, I've done that before. I think if they are from the same subject area that they're focusing on, it's good to meet together.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And we've got a few others. Elizabeth will meet her two Chinese mentees together in December. Beverly, separate, but if it would work, why not? So again, I think this is where you really need to feel into the relationship, and that's, it goes back to that trust and rapport, understanding what is, what is useful. A couple other perspectives, Carmen. My mentees are in different programs with different goals. A joint meeting wouldn't be productive. Fair enough. Elizabeth will go to Roy Thompson Hall together in December. Nice. Louisa, thank you, and Alice, separate so far. So again, you know, and ask, inquire, really find out what's important. So Karen, you have been very patient. Question, comment. What do you want?
Well, first, I just want to comment on what we just discussed to let people know that, as has been articulated here, whatever works, I think Bev said. And so, as you can hear, there are people who do meet with more than one person at a time and others who don't. So it's cool to do that if it's working for you. The other piece I just want to let people know is, if for any reason, and it can happen, something is really not working out with your mentee, first of all, Liliana and I are here to help mentors with those kinds of issues should they come up. And also, in the rare case where maybe a switch needs to take place, that is something we would be discussing with Natalie. So I just wanted people to have that background information. My comment before we had this little conversation, I just wanted to say that another thing, a strategy that can work when you feel your mentee is stuck, is to actually ask the mentee. Usually we want to go to the positive, but it's helpful sometimes to ask the mentee what they feel are the obstacles for their moving forward on whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes just being able to look at a particular obstacle, strategize how that might be removed or certainly mitigated, and taking small steps can really help to build momentum as you go along. So your mentee may come in with something that just seems huge, or to them it seems huge, but sometimes breaking it down can be helpful. So just a tip from my experience.
Love that tip. And I think so valuable, again, in a world which may seem very overwhelming on multiple levels to people these days. So yeah, how do we create a space for pause, reflection, learning, and of course action, right? That's the learning process, which you're all this is what you do every day. So really creating this in your world of conversation as well. So it sort of seems to me, would people be open to doing a bit of breakout work? We wanted to give you an opportunity to meet with a couple of other professionals tonight, other mentors. And one piece that I want to put in the space is, I'm not going to go to slides because I think slides really, we look at slides all day long. Want to just bring in a piece though around coaching and how coaching skills can be of value to you as a mentor. So we've touched on some of these already tonight. And one of the big coaching skills that I want you to be reflecting about is listening. And how are you listening in your conversations? We often listen for what is being said, but in coaching, we also listen for the negative, what is not being said. And so I really want to encourage you next time you sit down to really Be listening for either the subtext or what is not there. That might be an area you get curious around. In coaching, as we talk about listening, we obviously are listening on multiple levels. The body language, which if someone is streaming, we can see that. Recognize that if we're doing anything digitally, just by text or email, we lose all tone. We lose all of that tonality, which really creates so much meaning in a face-to-face environment. So where possible, if you can, have people stream. It's not always possible, but if you can virtually have people stream and just watch for anything that you might be bringing into the conversation that is yours rather than what is really happening. A final piece we want to look at tonight is also around questioning, right? Mentoring is a conversation, a two-way conversation. And so as coaches, one of the big skill sets that we practice and work around is, of course, asking questions with curiosity. Mentoring is the same. It's not about asking questions to validate perspectives. It's asking questions around inquiry or inquiry. So I want to give you a few minutes. I think if we look at time, maybe we'll take 10, 12 minutes to go to breakout this evening. And I'd love for you to first come together, introduce yourselves, right? You're going to be meeting each other virtually and maybe physically throughout the rest of this year as mentors. I'd like you to also share one of the favorite questions you like to use that will open up conversation. And I would say there's probably a few things to the questions that you're going to unearth. First of all, those questions might only be 4 or 5 words in length. We know that shorter questions are better questions in stimulating conversation. We also know that questions that start with what are going to open up the space more for dialogue, for two-way conversation. If we ask people questions that start with how, it's often going to take them into a process orientation. How do I get this done? What should I do? That might be where you want to direct them, but it might also be a little bit more focused than what is required. And a word of note, watch for starting questions with why. When trust levels are low, and it may not be reflective of your relationship, it may be reflective of the world outside, why questions typically put people on the defensive, especially in the virtual space where we may be connecting in from 2 realities in this great city of ours here in Toronto. So I would love for you to take the next 12 minutes to meet with 4 or 5 other colleagues, introduce yourself, and then share a few of the questions that you found have opened up the space for dialogue, have maybe challenged people to look at things from a different angle, or perhaps those questions have created some clarity. So is that a good enough structure for 12 minutes of connection with each other? All right, Leanna's like thumbs up. I like seeing that. You in your rooms can also, of course, always design something together that's going to be of greater value. We're just going to do this one breakout tonight, and I'm going to set them up. I'm going to get Zoom to do this randomly. So if for any reason you do not want to go to breakout, just don't accept the room invite. So I'm going to get Zoom to do this. I think we have about 25, 24 people. Karen and Liliana, you can accept or not. I'm getting Zoom to automatically put you in breakouts. We would love to do a bit of cross-pollination when you get back. So if there's a wonderful question, like one of those like, oh, that's such a good question, I've got to write it down, bring it back with you, because we will have rooms 1, 2, 3, and 4 reporting back. All right, it is the top of the hour, roughly 11 minutes after the hour, the system will bring you back. It'll take a minute, and that'll leave us about 5 minutes for discussion, a few questions, and we'll have you out by 6:30 Eastern. So with that, please feel free to accept your room invite. The system will take you out, and enjoy your conversation around coaching questions. You should have a little invite there on your screen saying you've been invited to breakout room X or Y. Just accept that room invitation and the system will move you out. So-
Jennifer, mine popped in and out, and so I wasn't able to click fast enough.
Okay, I can move you if you'd like to go. Liliana, would you
Sure.
like to move to room 2?
Yep, sure.
Okay. All right. We're actually going to move you in room 1. Now you'll see room 1. Do you see that invite coming up? All right. Ashley, shall I move you? Are you with us right now? Are you able to move to a room? And same with you, Alice. If you'd like, you can always stay here. You might have stepped away for a minute. All right. 6:01, we are going to come back to the main room in about 10 minutes. I'm going to just stand here. So if you want to unmute at any time, feel free, you can do so. Close the rooms right now. I'm going to start our recording again and close down our rooms. It'll be about a minute before everyone comes back, and then we'll have a few minutes to just cross-pollinate our learning and hear from the different groups what questions they came up with. Welcome back, Karen. Hope that you enjoyed your conversation. It's going to be about 45 seconds before people are back. That might be Karen's Otter AI. I'm not sure if it's Karen or Karen's Otter AI transcription. It might be the transcription that's come back into the room. I'm looking forward to hearing how these conversations went. We've got people coming out in about 20 seconds. I'm sure they're going to say, it wasn't long enough, because that is always what happens in this space. So we're going to hear about conversations. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that you enjoyed your time together. And we will have everyone out back in the room in the next few seconds. Who enjoyed it? Quick thumbs up if you enjoyed connecting in with others. Yeah, that is, to me, the value of these types of meetings. So I'm glad we could fit a little bit of dialogue with each other. Now, we had 4 breakout rooms, and I'm sure there were some really good questions that came up. I am going to just see, and I don't know if you noted what room you were in, but in room 1, we had Ashley, we had Beverly, Carolyn, and Liliana. Would any one of you like to share one of the questions that you came up with? Because we want to cross-pollinate some of these conversations with each other. So that's room 1, officially Ashley, who I think actually stayed with me. Beverly, go ahead. You go ahead.
So what we didn't come up with those questions. We did something else, which I'm putting nicely into the chat because I'm a compulsory note taker. We actually were talking about what were our takeaways from your session and what was our learning. And so it was that issue of mindfulness, of switching back as a mentor to being a mentee, listening to experience, and that for people who get challenged about maybe they don't feel they need a mentor, to remind them that everyone has a mentor. We all have mentors. And that issue around intentionality of being quite thoughtful about what we're doing, and for us, the why, which you said is that, but the self-evaluation. So I put it in the chat.
Fantastic. And I love, again, many of the people who might be watching this won't be able to read it. Beverly, would you like to read out those last 3 lines, or would you like me to read them out? Because I think they're
So
really
one of the issues that one of us has been dealing with has been, one of the mentees is having some mental health issues, and they are getting other support. So that's not, but it was being able to acknowledge the bravery of sharing, of being able to mirror and echo their concerns back to them in a way that showed them that you understood. And also for us, when we're in a situation where we're being stretched, that there is also assistance available to support the mentees. So so only all good, and the 3 of us enjoyed the interaction. So thank you.
well, thank you. What a rich conversation. As I always say, you know what? The conversation goes beyond the instructions. It's always phenomenal. So I really appreciate you, Beverly, as well, taking us into a very, real and I think very frequent area, which that is of mental health. You know, the last few years have been very challenging for so many as mentors. And I hope I'm not speaking beyond, again, I don't represent the OISE program, but I think what you've suggested of reaching out and helping people connect in with the resources that they can. We're not mental health counselors by any means. And so all we can do is really ensure that people are connecting in with what might be available. And then asking, once you've got the support you need, how else can this be supporting you in your ongoing journey? All right, so room 2, we're going to switch gears, maybe Binish, Carmen, Jeffrey, and Rupam. What did you talk about? Very briefly, we'd love to cross-pollinate here. Someone in room 2, Binish, Carmen, Jeffrey, Rupam. Anyone like to unmute?
I can go on everyone's behalf. First, we shared the fun part was that we begin with the food question. What restaurant make up a room a little bit lighter, more friendlier, start a conversation like we used to be friends in kindergarten. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite dress? Things like that, just to have a friendly conversation and rapport between both parties. Later, we discussed that the most energetic thing that happened to you is the question that we usually ask, or what is the most exciting thing you did this year or your biggest accomplishment for the year. So to build a confident beginning for the mentee to not feel alienated or deprived of any of their accomplishments, so to encourage them of their accomplishment already at the start. We do had Rupam, who's part of a mentee group, so we were lucky to have him as an experiment point. So we asked him what he'd like to know or understand. It's good to know that the program OISE is offering is helping so many people at different levels. So we did offer them any of their support if they're looking for in the future as a senior mentor. It was a great discussion, so happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for representing your room as well. So we have just a few more minutes. I really want to bring in room 3 next. That was Barbara, Karen, Liana, and Luisa. Would someone like to unmute and share a few of your questions? I see Karen leaning in, maybe going for it. Karen, are you going to try to unmute?
Trying to unmute there.
There you go. You got
With
it.
my group's permission, I think there were 3 things that happened in our group, and it was wonderful. I agree with everybody else. It's always great to be able to meet people and be able to talk to them. So we had, similar to other things that we've heard, we talked about how important establishing rapport is, no matter how we did it. And everybody has different ways of doing that. And we've heard lots of those kinds of ways, just to connect with the person. Then we did have different questions that we asked. Some were very goal focused, some were, different in nature. I talked about a question I asked about, what's a win that you've had this week, some to get the person into a positive frame of mind. So there were questions that we shared with each other, and I've heard more as we've listened to, as we're going around through the breakout rooms. The interesting thing to me as well, listening to other groups, and that came out in our group, is there seems to be, and I don't know if this was always the case, but there is, I think it's good for us as mentors to really be considering, there's a very high level of anxiety for many of the mentees, maybe for us as mentors as well. These are tough times. And so I think in the last group that we just heard from, we're not mental health professionals, but being able to direct someone if that's, what they need is really important, because we definitely had the theme of how anxious many of the mentees are, or feeling overwhelmed, or feeling that there's so much. So I think that's just for our program, a good sensibility to have and to kind of monitor as we go on.
Great. Well, thank you, Karen. Appreciate you representing room number 3. Let's go next. Actually, we're room 4. You were in 2 rooms. So we'll go to Frank, Karen, Maria, Emlikar. What would you like to add? That was room 4. Do we have Frank? Yeah. Do you want to unmute, Frank? If you can. Should just be maybe your space bar. There you go.
I can also go ahead. So I believe Amilcar and myself are new to this experience, and we've been quite busy with, our day jobs and families. And the challenge, Amilcar, you jump in, that we started to experience is just connecting with our mentee and establishing communication back and forth. Both Amilcar and myself provided our mentee with our phone numbers, and they have not called us. That would have been easier for us. I get the sense with my mentee that they're more comfortable with email. So as I said, and I did email just recently, and the mentee did specify as to when she's available. There's just challenging times for me. So we'll navigate moving forward. The one thing that we're not clear on is it mandatory? And this may be a reflection of us being busy and not reading all the materials that were provided. So I'll ask for forgiveness for that piece. Is it mandatory for the mentee to meet with us? Can we? Like,
so what with us? Could you do it by email? Is that the inquiry?
On the part of OISE, is the expectation, is this voluntary? Is it something that's mandatory? What happens if the mentee chooses not to move forward with the mentee-mentor relationship? We're just trying to have a framework. And as I said, that may have been provided. And again, I apologize as I haven't reviewed that.
Yeah, I had the same question just to kind of gauge the level of intrinsic motivation here. Is it something that they really want, or is it kind of an institutional requirement, like a tickety box that needs to be checked before they graduate?
Yeah, great question. Karen, Liliana, do you want to step in here?
The expectation is that you meet with your mentee at least for 6 sessions throughout the whole academic year. However, that could be, different for each situation. I don't know if Natalie is on here. She would be better to answer
I can answer some of the questions, Liliana.
Cindy's on this for a long time. So maybe Cindy, you can pipe in here.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Karen, or shall I?
Sure. So there are materials, and I can appreciate that people are really busy and take a look at them, because they give you a suggested framework and suggested structure. So a person participating in this is not mandatory. People who are participating in this are participating because they want to. And it is, of course, suggested that there are, and you've been hearing that tonight, that there's an establishment of some form of consistent routine, because if the person never meets with you, you're not going to be able to mentor them and they won't be a mentee. So it is important to work that out with your mentee. If you're discovering that something may have changed for someone and they don't really want to be in a mentoring relationship, then that is something to bring to the attention of Natalie. That's why Liliana mentioned her, because behind the scenes, Natalie is, and she is working, she's employed by OISE, and this is part of her role to help work with the program, find mentors, find mentees, and there's a matching, program that goes on. And so people like Cindy, who've been involved for a long time, Liliana, myself, we could confer with Natalie all the time. So as a mentor, you have been assigned a mentee. Presumably that person wanted to be mentored. And then if you're discovering that something else is going on and they don't want to be mentored or they're not reachable, then that is something that you would bring to Natalie's attention, because we need to know that, and you either would not be mentoring that person if that's the outcome. Did that answer your question?
And I think, Maria, we've got you just on mute. Cindy?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. So thanks, Karen. That was perfect answer. You covered a lot of the points, and Liliana, thanks for mentioning Natalie as well, because Natalie is our key person in the advancement office. But to answer the question that was just asked about whether it's a university requirement, a must, it's not. It's a volunteer service that OISE and a lot of the other departments and faculty around campus offers. Mentoring has become such a big an attractive thing now, because students are graduating and are not able to find jobs, and so the university and the different departments feel that by connecting them with someone who is working and have life experience, we're able to help students develop and prepare for mostly after they graduate. So yeah, there is no any one specific way of mentoring. If your mentee doesn't respond, just let Natalie know. Sometimes they need a little bit of push. You might have to keep writing them a couple of times, because one, your email might have gone to the junk mail, or secondly, they might not have recognized you, or they just have so many emails and they missed it. So I would encourage you to just keep following up with the individual, your mentee. And then, if nothing works out in a couple of months, then, say, well, okay, you've done everything you can. And then connect with Natalie so that she knows. We at OISE really pride ourselves as our mentorship program, because we have one of the best. We are really, a lot of the different faculties are trying to copy us. And you're the people who make it the best, because you have so much to offer and you want to give back so much. In our group just now, we were talking about where we're at as individual, mature individuals who have gone through the program and have worked and have family, and how we've seen life. And we want to help the younger students come and be successful. So I said earlier, it's a one-on-one relationship. So Amilcar, don't worry too much, or Maria, don't worry too much if your mentee doesn't respond, but just follow up with them. There are other issues that might be preventing them. And as first timers, as mentors, they are resources. Liliana, myself, Karen, one of us would be happy to sit down with you and sort of go through some of the requirements or things that you think you might be missing. So I'm going to leave it there, but
thank you.
You're welcome.
That's very good. And I'm glad you mentioned the issue of jobs, because that's actually why I became a New York City public school teacher. At the time, there were no jobs in the TDSP, especially coming out of OISE. I mean, I was saying this in my breakout room, but it was like a long path of substitute teaching, leading to potential long-term occasional teaching, leading to maybe someday a full-time teaching job. So that's kind of where I saw my ability to kind of give back to OISE, through helping students looking for you know, a full-time job leading to a tenured teaching position.
Mhm.
Kind of the information that I had to learn all by myself in terms of getting certified in another jurisdiction and meeting, you know, gaps in my education that were not part of my OISE education that that were required in New York State. That's really why I put myself out there in terms of being a mentor. So if that's something, the jobs issue is something that OISE is really keen on, I'd hope you could reach out to me about that, because there are a lot of teaching positions in New York City. It's just an issue of helping people figure out how to get certified in New York State.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And
So
I
I just wanted to add,
Yeah.
back to Maria's question, is it mandatory? Like, how often do you have to meet? So as I said before, 6 sessions is just like a framework.
Mhm.
But each relationship, as we know, our mentor-mentee relationship can be different. There's some situations where they meet more than 6 times.
Yeah.
So it depends on the person that you have and what you've worked out with them. You may need more, you may need less, but 6 is the recommended amount. I hope that helps.
I think the question, just to further clarify, and then we'll stop,
Yep.
is it is not a university requirement that somebody participate in this mentorship program.
Right.
Once they have made that decision, then everything that Cindy said and Liliana said come into play.
Right, because it's voluntary.
Yeah, it's voluntary.
Just
Thank
like you're volunteering. So we want to respect your time. I want to thank you for your engagement. Thanks, Liliana, Karen, for having me in tonight. You'll get a copy of the slides, have my contact details if there's anything I can do from an external standpoint. And I'm going to let Karen and Liliana wrap up our meeting now.
Okay, so Karen, I'll take it away. So Jennifer, on behalf of the OISE committee, the mentors here, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to speak with us tonight on how we can improve our relationship with our mentees and giving us some really practical advice and ideas that we can implement the next time we meet with our mentees. Thank you again. And just a reminder to all of you that if you need any help, if you need any resources, Karen, myself, and Cindy are available. We're just actually a mouse click away. So just let us know what you need, and we're more than willing to help in any way that we can and willing to support you. So thank you again, Jennifer. Thank you, Karen, for organizing this. And thank you, all of you, for taking the time tonight. I know it's been a long day at work, at school, but time just flew by tonight because we were having so much fun. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Again, if you need any help, just let us know.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Nice to meet everyone.
You as well.
Good night.
Thank you.
very
Good
much.
night.
I'm going to shut the recording off and it will go to Natalie. So